So once you all settle down, grab a chair or something, sit down, because it's going to be a very interesting discussion moving forward. So we have our very own, who doesn't require any introduction at all, but just for the sake of anyone who is new here, I have Dr. Philip Smith. I know Philip Smith for a very long time. I remember meeting him back in 2006 when he came to Pakistan, Karachi, to do a SANOG workshop. That was my first interaction. I was very new as a support engineer in an ISP, and that's how I learned BGP. Somehow, BGP hasn't changed since then. But of course, the way we configure things has changed a lot. We spend more time into security. At that time, it was just configure and forget about it. It's not anymore. It's more critical because internet has become a critical part of our lives. So Philip Smith has been part of the industry for more than 30 years, if I'm not mistaken. And he has worked with Cisco, with APNIC, and currently associated with NSRC. And of course, been doing with a lot of work with us, with MANRS, with Internet Society, and helping the community to do the things in a better way. So over to you, Philip. How are you doing?
Well, doing very well in this brave new world that we're living in, of being stuck at home in our new sort of living space. I suppose I've had probably, 6 months to get used to just sitting in one place, 7 months. So it's a very, very different world from probably the last 20 years at least. I think it was my UK days where it was probably the last time I've been in one place for such a long time as now. But so it puts a very different perspective on what we're trying to do and what we're even discussing here right now.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, at least now we can travel within the country. I feel for those people who are in complete lockdown, and we support you. We are here for you, and this conversation is for you. So you have any questions, please make sure that you ask those questions in the Q&A box or in the chat. Make sure that you have, if you have any queries, just please go ahead and do it. So let's start with some questions. What's happening in the RPKI world right now? You have been doing so many workshops, and you recently recorded a long series of online tutorials for NSRC, and also focused on, I mean, it's on the BGP, but of course focuses on the security factors in the BGP, with security tweaks in the BGP you need. So I mean, as I said, you have been doing it for so long, but every now and then we see another draft or RFC coming in from the ITF and saying, okay, tweak a little bit that, tweak a little bit over there. So what do you think is happening with BGP itself? Let's put RPKI on the side for just a moment. Well,
and I think you said it right at the start of the introduction. BGP has been around for such a long time. It hasn't really changed that much. I mean, it hasn't changed at all, really. I mean, I still think the heyday for BGP was, well, the heydays, weeks, months, years, really were from 1994-ish, thereabouts, when we moved from BGP version 3 to version 4, and then probably through to about 2001, 2002. Because that's where all the major changes and developments and so forth were being made. I mean, maybe it influenced me more because I was working at the UK's first ISP back then, and we had every single beta release or even alpha release, or hey, try this code that I built last night coming from Cisco, of new features. I mean, it wasn't just a tweak or whatever, communities appeared on the back of an envelope, and we tried this out. What else was, Netflow was this amazing thing that, just try this out, see what it's like. And it was these kind of unofficial, informal images that we were testing out. But those were game changers for a lot of BGP pretty much from then on. Whereas, after about 2001, 2002, I suppose I was working at Cisco then, but there wasn't really the same big drive of lots and lots of things changing. I mean, really the biggest one, I suppose, would have been 4-byte AS numbers, getting that support in there so we can carry on, I suppose, growing the internet. But, comparing that effort, the folks who were involved know the hard work that they had to do to go and persuade vendors to actually get it in the code, because it was all this, what's the business case? It was then persuading operators that no, the internet would not break, and no, you do not use AS23456 as your own autonomous system. And, so we'd been through a lot of that big pain. So it wasn't like 94 to 2000 where, this is great, this is new, let's go and do it. It was, really, do we have to do this? Is there a workaround? What's the business case? Why? And, there were the laggards. I mean, I certainly remember in the Asia Pacific region, as we're seeing big allocations of 4-byte AS numbers in Europe, and there was almost nothing happening in the Asia Pacific region. I was working with APNIC to try and, get better awareness, as you well remember as well. And so now we've got RPKI, and guess what? It's the 4-byte AS number thing, to me, at least, as, doing outreach, doing a lot of training and awareness. It's the same thing repeating itself, but it's even harder now than it was with the 4-byte AS number thing.
So on that note, I mean, we had earlier this in the year, we had this conversation with George Michelson from APNIC, and he rightly mentioned that every time we talk about RPKI, we talk about BGP. Well, they are related, but it's not, you are not changing anything. When you are implementing something, you're not changing anything in the BGP itself, right? So there are multiple phases. You are creating a ROA. When you create a ROA, you are absolutely not doing anything in your BGP session. So what is stopping you? And so that brings that question that, do you think it's the maturity of the RPKI or the conversation we are having with the operator is not good enough, that there is a roadblock, which we call it here and there, that, there are certain roadblocks in the RPKI deployment. What are the roadblocks? Is the maturity of the technology or the protocol we are talking about, or it's a misunderstanding with the operators?
I think it's simply awareness of the operators, and that's not a criticism of the operators. We're no longer in the days of 2 or 3 people who do the whole network infrastructure, design from rolling out routers to running them, to doing the day-to-day ops and fixing problems. We're now looking at operators with divisions doing this, divisions doing that. There's another group that's looking after the address space, dealing with relationships with the registries. And you have to sort of walk up and down the whole organization to do even simple things like, you can't do route origin validation without trying to get your own ROA assigned. Well, maybe you could, but you've got all these pieces all over the place, and you've got to walk over a lot of these organizations if you're working inside them just to try and get anything done. And even some of the organizations I've talked with recently, a few of them have said, is there a vendor who can do this for us? And I'm like, because they don't want to do it in their own ops team. Their whole design is that, well, here's a feature we have in our network. We'll bring in a vendor who will run that feature for us, and they will support it and keep it up to date and make sure that it all works. And well, which vendor is going to do the RPKI piece to get the ROA signed, and which vendor is going to do the ROV piece and making sure that all works, who's going to put in the validator, well, which validator, or do we have 2? And there's nobody even stepping up to do this. And I see some organizations say, well, too much for us. We want somebody, put an RFP out, somebody replies, and they do it for us. Finish. And so, there's that level also. We've been around all the different NOGs, we've talked about this, and a lot of the people who are coming there say, I would really like to do this, but the ROA stuff, that's somebody else's division. And getting changes in the network made, well, there's this issue, there's that issue. I've got to get approval, and they've got to go way up to some bureaucrat somewhere. Not a criticism, but they have to go up the pile to get that approval. They've got to make the business case, explain why. And so, it's a very big change day from hey, Philip, here's a new code. It does this flow thing. Try it with the network and let us know. We're not there anymore, much as we want to be. If we'd been doing this in 1994, it would have been globally, deployed and not many, questions really asked, I feel.
So I mean, it is still in a nutshell. It is still about the awareness. So I mean, I do it. I've been doing it. You have been the most vocal and most critical in the community for a long time about this one. So you think the approach we have taken should be changed, or it is the mass messaging is not the idea? It's sit down with the operators individually and try to understand their problem first before we give them the message?
Well, I think it's just the mass awareness. I mean, if I look at the work that, for example, Mohammed Abdul Awal has been doing through South Asia as part of his Mozilla Fellowship, I mean, that's an extraordinary example of what can be achieved, and getting good support from APNIC and others in the community to reach out to every single operator. We've seen examples, Tashi Funsu got Bhutan up to 100%, but that's local knowledge. We did the same thing in Mongolia. We got up to 100% because the locals really worked at it. And so, we could repeat things like that throughout the whole region. Now look what's happening in India. At the start of this year, there was almost nothing. And then it was just the awareness.
I see Anurag Bhatia from Hurricane Electric. He's been following up with operators and sending them requests and things. I mean, he's doing an amazing job. But it's like it's the individual's approach which is working. So I think that approach is still going to. We need, I would say, champions in every country to make sure that it works out well. Let's find somebody in Australia to do that. Okay, so let's move on. You mentioned APNIC, right? So we have this model. It's not just the APNIC, there are 5 RIRs. And this model is that the RPKI is mostly people are relying on the RIR hosted model. So they are not self-hosting it, they're using the RIR to host their ROAs. And it is the most easier model, I would say, because you already have your APNIC account or right NCC portal access. You can just go there and make a ROA. Do you think the UX is not that friendly as it was used to be for the route object creation? Because if you see from a step back, there's no difference between creating a route object and creating a ROA, right? So it's the same thing. People are very used to creating a route object. Why they are not so used to creating a ROA?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's not to pick on any of the registries at all, but I mean, I certainly find that some of the comments I'm getting from operators. I mean, there's one I'm just working with at the moment, have been for the last 3 months, and I suppose it's a lot more of a big process that they have to do simply to get a row assigned. And, so this particular one, the person is the technical contact, but the admin trying to even explain to the admin what has to be done to give the tech contact the actual capability to get a row assigned. And it's not a case of, APNIC help talk through or RIPE-NCC help talk through. It's within the organization itself. So the step is very, very difficult. If I wanted a domain, for example, I can go to my domain registrar and I get my domain and look after my domain. I've got my 2-factor authentication, proves who I am, well, sufficiently, I would hope. And I can just do it and it just works. But for the ROA, it's a lot more hoops that have to be done. The tech contact is no longer given the ultimate responsibility of getting a ROA assigned because it affects the routing system which the tech contact is responsible for. But the reasons why it has to go through that layer, I suppose. But as you observe, the simplicity is simply not there. I mean, again, in the old days, creating a route object was email the route object in, and that was it. And I suppose that's also why we have such a bad system in the Internet Routing Registry as well. So, tidying some of that up is obviously needed, but I think we've probably gone too far on the other side now that for some organizations, at least some of the ones I've been trying to help, it becomes really difficult for them internally because of all the different layers. And as I was saying right at the start, the people who look after the address space, the administration side, have no idea what any of this is and don't know what's being asked of them by the technical people who are probably very aware of what we're trying to do, but just can't get it done. So, there definitely needs to be a smoothing of that process.
Yeah, I hope somebody from APNIC is, and the other RIRs are listening to this conversation, and it's and probably they are aware of that. They have done, at least I have seen it in the APNIC, they have done some consultation sessions, but I haven't seen any improvement yet. So I'm not sure what is happening. Hopefully things will improve. And I do agree with your point, because I was talking to someone, because I sent a report to an operator saying you have too many invalids. What happened? And say, yes, we know, but we don't have access to remove the ROAs. Because the person who did it has left, and we have raised a request within the organization to get the access. So once we get the access, we'll be able to do it. So in the meanwhile, what we can do, we can advertise these prefixes. And I said, that's not the solution. I think it's a better solution is to delete those invalid ROAs. So yeah, I totally agree with your point of view. So now going into a slightly different direction, right? So we discussed something about the maturity of the, I would say the whole ecosystem where RPKI runs, right? So the one thing we said, okay, fine, creation of the ROA, but those operators who wants to jump ahead and say, okay, fine, we have created the ROAs, now we want to go into the validation, right? Now the route origin validation, we did two deployathons, right? One in the APNIC, I think it was 48 or something, and then in the last apricot, we did that as well. It was widely successful, and we saw success stories coming out after those deployathons. But what we have seen is the limited number of relying party softwares, the validators we call in journal. So do you think it's a limiting factor that we don't have that many validators, and the operators see that as a limiting factor?
I'm not aware of anybody saying it's a limiting factor. When those two deployathons were really very educational, as you said, because back in Chiang Mai last year, it was in APNIC 48, we basically set, I wouldn't say the general public, but we invited network operators to just come along and install, I think it was 3 validators we opted. And we spent half an afternoon trying to do that, and only one succeeded, and others were stuck in a lot of misery, which they then worked on. So we were in a much better situation when we held Apricot in Melbourne. And, and recently, of course, the 3 main validators, because, the RIPE NCC one, they've decided to shut down development from that. I think it's from July next year. They're going to stop all development and support of their one. But if you look at the other 3, they're now installable as a Debian package. So it's just an apt install. And so, which one do you use? I mean, one of the things we did at Apricot was, well, can we compare the outputs of the 3 validators, or was it 4 validators that we used? And do we get the same answers? And I think it was only Job Sniber's tweet the other day, finally 2 validators are actually agreeing to give the same output. So, if I cast my mind back, I mean, pretty much for many, many years, we're all relying on bind for DNS. And, okay, there was NSD way back years ago, and, Microsoft had something or other, but by and large, pretty much the whole internet was using bind, and nobody really worried about it. And of course, if DNS stops, the internet's shut down as far as the end users are concerned. So, I think having even 3 validators lets us make sure that, well, either we've all got it wrong, which is consistent, or at least it makes sure that, those 3, and there are other efforts as well, but the 3 main ones, plus the RIPE NCC one, those are, I think it's a very good variety for the ops community. I know some operators use just one validator. They've made the decision to go with one. My preference is to run two because, well, BGP guy, I prefer to be multi-homed. So to have two operating so that, if something really goes badly wrong on the development side, in the coding or whatever, at least the other one is providing some consistency and so forth. So, I don't think that's really a reason anymore. I mean, if all the validators were, suspect at some level, then I could understand. But, we've had stability, I would say, since at least this time last year, if not longer. I've relied on them a lot longer than that.
Yeah, I remember somebody asked me this question a couple of weeks ago that which validator you recommend, and and for my own lab, I mean, I don't run a production network, but I run my own lab, and I've been using Routinator and Fort validator for a few months, and I haven't. And they said, how are they stable? I said, well, I have never looked at it because I never found any problem with it. So they've been working very fine, as long as once in a while we have to upgrade them because new versions coming up every now and then because there are tweaks coming in. So otherwise they are very much stable. So yes, it's not an issue. But let's say let me say something different from what we have been preaching. We've been saying this for a very long time. Run your own validator as close as possible to your edges, where you're gonna run where your BGP routers are. Right? But what, for example, is a network operator, a small operator, saying, I don't have, let's say I don't have the expertise to run a Linux box with a Debian package in it. I know enough to run this. I have 5,000 subscribers. South Asia, 5,000 subscriber is an ISP in a small shop, right? So can I just outsource my validation to somebody else? Do you think there is a reason to do that? Number one. Absolutely. I mean, we still have, I mean, we always preach something different, but when I talk to someone and they said, no, I don't know, it's too difficult for me, I can't do it. Can you just tell me where should I point my RTR session to? And that's it. Yeah. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I don't see any reason why, for example, an internet exchange point should not to be offering that service to the members. I mean, a lot of exchange points are now running validators anyway, just against the route server. So why can't they just make that available for all the members as part of the service? And, they can choose it if they want to. Some of the bigger providers will obviously want to use their own validator setup, but why not for the smaller members or those who just don't want to do it? I mean, at the exchange point, anyway, you're going to rely on the route server, which is going to give you a lot of local connectivity. So relying on the validator, the worst thing that happens if the validator breaks, then everything is available. So it's going to fail in a good way rather than a bad way. Whereas the route server breaks, it's going to fail in a very bad way. You're only going to get access to your upstream provider. So, I think this would be a perfect service for an internet exchange point to offer. But even if you look at the transit providers, a mid-sized transit provider with a lot of small, well, I wouldn't say internet cafe, but, the small provider that you've described, serving maybe a city or a town or a small region, they've got a few hundred, few thousand subscribers. Why not get that service from the upstream provider if they actually want to do the validation? But then again, if the upstream's doing all the validation, would a smaller operator even need it? They need to look at it. I don't think we need to have everybody in the whole planet doing it, but we certainly need all the transit, everybody who's providing transit to do it, and the exchange points to do it to catch, I think, most circumstances.
Right. So the next question, as you mentioned, we don't need everyone to do it. Right? So this is the problem we face in the MANRS, and people say, oh, there are 70,000 networks and you are so happy with 500 participants. I said, no, you have to look at the 500 key participants. Those participants I mean, some of the participants, they are providing transit service to 20,000 subscribers. So they they cover a big chunk of the network map. So similarly, if as in my initial message, in my initial question, if we start targeting the big operators, I mean, thankfully, Telia, NTT, Hurricane Electric, they have been doing it, in Telstra at back home, they have decided to do it. Superloop, they're doing it in Australia, Aussie Broadband. I mean, they are the big operators. But what about the other big operators in South Asia, in Africa? There are some big operators in Africa already doing it because if I don't say it, Mark Tinker is going to kill me. Uh, yeah, there are some big operators doing it, but a lot of big operators are still not doing it.
Yep.
Right? So if we can focus, again, the question is, we did a mass messaging. A lot of small operators said, oh yeah, we have created the ROAS, we have done this and we have done that. But the big operators are not taking the decisions yet.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they should be, I mean, enough with the carrot, come up with the stick.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, but you know, the problem is, what stick can we even offer them? You know, we've gone from the days of, you know, Sean Duran at Sprint basically shutting people off if they didn't do aggregation, and you know, did that really achieve what the goal was? I mean, it was great that somebody did. You know, we've gone away from, well, I remember in the days, you know, the so-called cider police as well. You know, and it wasn't the police, it was folks like me, Barry Green, Hank Nussbacher, and so forth, knocking on doors of providers and saying, do you really need to announce, you know, 256/24s? You know, can you do it another way? And I think it's, you know, the way is engagement. And it goes back to, I think, the successful model that we've seen in Awal and Tashi and Anurag and others, you know, Latin America have had a lot of success there as well. Just that personal contact, and trying to work with some of the leaders in those big operators. Because I think, you know, the folks who will come to the NOGs and so forth are at the level in the organization where the leadership probably doesn't listen to them because they see them as, oh, they're just there to run the network. So we need to have some way of getting into, you know, the higher level part of the organization, and not, I mean, it's not tell them you must do this because it's good for the internet, but to explain the pros and the cons. You know, it's the MANRS story as well, but you know, it's explain how this is important, why it's important, and see how they can put it into the next year plan and so forth. You know, and that's really going to have to be the way to try and do it, and it's going to be really hard to do on a video conference. And that's why, you know, this year, I'm amazed at the successes of this year. It's the perseverance of those people. They get huge credit for that. But you know, when we can travel and do this in person, it's so much better. I remember so many experiences at Cisco talking about a lot of these things. Cisco was always very keen to show off telepresence, and all the feedback I got was, wow, Philip, it's nice to see your moving picture, but next time we meet, we meet in person.
Yeah.
So, because, you know, that's what that level organization actually wanted. And I think a lot of them appreciate that direct meeting at that high level to explain some of the issues in fairly straightforward language, so they understand and can actually prioritize an organization.
Okay, that's, yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no replacement of meeting someone in person and talking to someone on in a lobby of a good conference like in NOG or Apricot, having a cup of coffee or drink and just trying to understand their problem and trying to address that problem as well. I absolutely agree. Hopefully we'll be able to do it next year sometime, but let's see how it goes. Now, going back to another question. So it's not very common in the APNIC region, and I haven't seen much in the right and CC region as well. But it's very common in the ARR region. Hosted RPKI. The operators are opting for self-hosted RPKI rather than even in the LAC region. I mean, there's massive because the way LACNIC works. So they have opted for hosted RPKI. Do you see any reason for that in our region, in the Asia Pacific region, where operators opt for, or they would like to do the hosted one?
Well, I mean, I would probably not see a reason, but I could understand, there might be trust issues in, the North America and South America regions, well, especially North America, because it's a very, let's talk to the lawyers first rather than trying to solve things. So they have, I can certainly understand where that is coming from, because if people are afraid that somehow Aaron would mess things up for them, they have their destiny in their own hands, so that somehow something doesn't break. And well, it's, so I could see from that side, but here in the Asia Pacific region, I suppose if a big operator just has a policy that, well, we need to be able to run all this themselves, why not? There's extra complexity running your own CA. People want to go for that complexity and do it, but I'm very much keep it simple. And if the registry is doing a good job, it's reliable. They're running a distributed infrastructure such that even if one site breaks, you still get your feed from this or access to the CA wherever it might be. Then I don't see any need for an operator to run it. I mean, I would never go to an operator and say, "Oh, you need to do your own one." It's like, Epinic's running, it's working just fine. So unless you've got something that's really broken and they're not able to support it, then maybe you look at doing your own thing. But do you want that pain? I know the CAs are out there and you could do it if you want to, but several people have said it's an extra degree of pain that you have to go through to do it. And it doesn't really fit with my keep it simple model or desire.
I mean, I totally understand as well. It's like it's still. I mean, I'm still getting everything from the 5 tells I have installed in it, right? So my trust anchors are still the RIRs, right? So you still have to work with the RIR even if you want to do a hosted RPKI. And another one is like, how does it scale? If everybody, let's say there are 10,000 members in Arran region or something similar in the APNIC region, if we have like 20, 30,000 hosted CAs, then how are you going to update if you're doing it every 5 minutes, then just you can imagine how difficult you are making it for a normal operator, that how are you going to sync it. So it's like, I mean, I haven't seen any problem. But I said, just a disclaimer, I don't run in any operational network, but big operators like Telstra and others who have been doing it quite nicely so far, they are relying on APNIC and other RIRs. So why adding that complexity, as you said? We are pretty okay with it. We haven't heard any major issues in trust or trusting the RIRs yet.
Yeah.
So
no major infrastructure breakage either.
Yes. I mean, there were some issues here and there, but of course, it's an operational network. I mean, things will break here and there as long as there is enough redundancy available. I think it should be fine. And we are at that stage that if something breaks, the internet is not going to break, right? So you'll be accepting a lot of garbage routes, but still it will still be working at this stage. We are not dropping the unknowns. We are not at that stage. Hopefully, at some point we will be, but not at the moment. Right. So, I'm just going into my final discussion is what can trigger the mass ROA adoption, other than talking to people within the country one by one, or what else can help improve the ROA adoption?
Well, I mean, the whole, ongoing list of hijacks and so on doesn't seem to make much difference. It doesn't make people think, oh, that could be me, I have to do something. So I honestly don't know. How do you enforce it? You can't force people. It's a tough one. You know, no tier one is going to tell their provider customers, you have to do this if you're going to remain connected to us. Money talks, so they will want the money from the transit business. So they can ask nicely, but it probably can't go further than that. So how you would enforce it, no idea. There's no driving license to join the internet as a service provider. And you know, I say that because, well, that was one of the things I was saying in the early BGP workshops. You know, you need to, you know, you have to pass a test before you can give access to a router because of all the BGP accidents. And that was 20 years ago. I was complaining about that, and you know, the accidents and incidents just go onwards and upwards. Will there be some absolutely major, massive incident that takes everything down, or so much down that that it causes a big issue? But you know, what would the big issue even have to be? You know, we've seen things where, you know, some of the big content providers have vanished for even an hour or so, and all you see on the various discussion, oh, such and such no longer works. What's happened to my TV program I was watching, and so forth. And that still doesn't seem to make anybody think that, oh, you know, RPKI is one of the solutions. Well, never mind RPKI, MANRS would be even the solution. You know, if they would take it and apply all those principles, and everybody would do that, it would make a big difference. It's not a cure-all, but it will make a very, very big difference. But you know, how bad do the incidents have to get? And I don't know.
I mean, on the way, I have to say this, yourself and very keen on, I think you just gave up on BCP 38.
Oh, we did, yeah. And you know, and this was pushback from inside the vendor side as well, because you know what, at least the security group in our group in Cisco was trying to do was actually make it default on access interfaces and access devices, and that was an absolute no way, can't do this, because oh, it might break networks unexpectedly. And it's like, well, it would appear in the configuration, but it would be on as a default thing to have URPF there. And you know, what a huge service that would have done globally, but everybody steps back because, ooh, I don't want to be sued just in case. So yeah, and it's a tough one. You know, we still do it, we still talk about it, but you've said 70,000 ASs out there. That's a lot to do.
Yes, it's a lot. Maybe we can focus on the top 100 HIDA list and see how it goes. Another one. So this is just last question before we go into the Q&A. Is you have seen a lot of operating system, the network operating system. We have seen Cisco, you have seen Juniper, you have seen. I mean, we tested them in the deployathon. You have seen the Nokia SROS, Arista. I have tested myself. MikroTik has a somewhat working code as well. Do you think these operating systems are stable enough to handle the validation part now?
Oh, the big name vendors, definitely. You know, they've had the code there for quite a few years. You're notwithstanding bugs that aren't fixed. You know, there's a lot of, well, okay, not picking on Cisco, but you know, a lot of Cisco 7200s, 7301s out there still in servers running code that from back in 2016, which has RPKI issues. I mean, it'll work, but there are issues that, you know, that we've highlighted in the 2 deployathons. And you know, I've asked, you know, operators have actually asked, you know, big Cisco accounts, and it's just not, old kit, no longer supported, and not interested in doing it. And you know, the issue is we've got such a short lifespan of a lot of kit these days. You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, kit would be lasting 10, 15, 20 years, and you would still have some expectation of getting upgrades. But you know, you look at your Apple devices now, they're obsolete after 4 years. No more software upgrades. It's now a piece of electronic junk. And so, you know, onwards we go. It's just, but yes, I mean, the kit, at least the ones I'm aware of, the mainstream ones, are definitely up to being able to handle this. I know operators have been doing this for several years. you've got to work around the defaults that the vendors have decided are best for you, or the slightly esoteric way of getting things set up. But as we saw in the deployathon, it's all possible. It's all known what has to be done.
So one quick question on that one. I still remember working with an ISP. We used to look at the data sheets and see how many RFC compliance are there. So should we start looking at the data sheets for vendor and saying, do you comply with the RPKI RFC? Or just look at, do they offer RPKI? Because if you start looking at what implementation they have of the RPKI is slightly different. What we have seen in the deployathon is slightly different in every platform. So should we start looking at, as from the operator's point of view, should we start looking at, do you comply with the RFC, or you just have implemented RPKI in the best possible manner you think is appropriate?
No, I mean, compliance, absolutely. I mean, we look for compliance when we go and buy a router that does BGP. I certainly won't buy a router that kind of sort of does BGP or kind of sort of does IPv6. You know exactly what I'm referring to. And, I wouldn't touch it, but it's widely used. And, so the same issue, Ben's just mentioned in the chat there, if we actually measure the compliance, then it might give Cisco a bit of motivation to actually fix what they're shipping, because it's just not compliant with RFC at all. And you've got to turn off so many different things to make it, as we found in the deployathon, both deployathons, you've got a maze to go through just to actually make it comply with what we are expecting. Why was it so hard to get it right the first time around? It was not like the RFC was vague. It was very clear what had to be done. So I think certainly publishing compliant with the RFC would be a helpful tool. I agree.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I just read the message from Ben. iOS XE is still having problem, and that's strange. iXE is one of the major network OS for them, which is running on a lot of edge devices. So that's iOS XE and the XR ones are, I mean, forget about the 7200 iOS. If XE and XR are having problems, that vendors have to look into this one quite urgently.
Yeah, so, but it's the major customers are certainly providing the feedback. Mark Tinker has been knocking on that door. I don't know how many years Mark's been doing it, and it's like, yeah, doesn't matter, don't care. We've done what we've done. Oh, we'll look at it. It'll appear on a roadmap somewhere, and that's a shame. I'm not having a go at Cisco, but it's just, it's that kind of, we've documented what the standard is. Why just not implement it? Why is it so hard?
Well, that's a good point to work with the vendors in 2021 before Ben started ripping out all the XP devices from his network.
I think Mark and Ben are competing with ripping out.
Yes. Let's see which device they put it in, and would like to hear more feedback on that one, which is working. And I did the testing with the router OS, which is MikroTik. I would say they have done a good attempt, but that's an attempt. So let's leave it there.
Yeah, and my question is, well, then why is it an attempt? How many years ago did we first start doing this? I mean, we were doing RPKI 2012, wasn't it? 2013?
I saw the first implementation in 2014.
Okay, it must be 2013 or so.
And I yes, exactly. So it's been that long. Even if it is like, let's say 2015, 5 years, how difficult your OS lifecycle is that you can't implement. The FRR, which is quite recent, the free range routing, which is very recent, of course, is an open source one. They have implemented RPKI. I've been using in my lab for at least 6 months. Haven't faced any issue because my home network is working fine. So I haven't faced any issue yet. So how long does it take to implement this? Why it is still broken? That is still beyond. And the thing is, we can't just say, oh, it's MikroTik. No, a lot of operators are relying on MikroTik. Specifically, we see in South Asia, and Latin America, and in Africa, it's a massive deployment on the edges for sizable ISPs. And it's not there yet. So a good message for the vendors, I would say.
But, and that's what we're saying right at the start, it's the 4x number story all over again, and it's, and the folks who had to, go around the vendors, beat them hard, shame them in public and all the rest just to get some progress. I remember on my own part, and I was still at Cisco then, it was like, Philip, tell me the business case. That was what I got. The business case. You need a business case for an AS number. It's mind-boggling.
Well, I think people have a good enough business case these days for the routing security part, I would say. And I mean, the only problem is a lot of people assume that it will solve all the security issues. We are just trying to address the origin issue right now.
This is just the start.
It is just the start. If you are so reluctant at the beginning, just imagine what will be your reaction if you try to encourage you to do a little bit more. So yeah, so this is something I struggle with a lot of time. So let's sorry. So let's move into some questions and answers. Just to everybody, if you have more questions, please put it in the Q&A or in the chat wherever you think it is appropriate. So one question from Zubair is, can RIRs force people to make ROAs in any form or way? Or can RIRs announce one-time discount? Well, that's a good one. For IV number resources, if ROA is created. I can certainly, if you create all the ROAs, if you turn everything green, I can definitely send you a t-shirt, but I don't think so that IPNIC can give you a discount. But let's see. Do you think forcing operators to create ROA in some way or form is going to work?
No, I mean, because what will happen then is they'll create it and they'll forget about it. And I'm really worried that all the efforts that we've been making this year, the progress, people go, oh, they've done it, and they've forgotten about it because, people are not really tweaking and tuning the BGP every day. So when did they last go and, is the validator still working? Oh, when did I last go and sign my, or do I need to sign another ROA for that /24 I'm leaking? Or, oh, I've bought a RTBH service from an RTBH vendor. Oh, I need to add their AS in as, for ROA and so forth. People aren't doing this every 3-4 days. It's like, I suppose it's like your Let's Encrypt certificate. It renews every 90 days, which in theory is often enough that you don't actually forget about it. But, and that's what I'm really worried about is that, if you force people to sign it or give them incentive to sign it, they'll do it because they get the incentive and then they forget. And then 6 months or a year down the track when they've changed traffic engineering or changed something else in the network, and then we end up with all these invalids, and then we've got operators dropping invalids and the end users like, oh, I can't see half the internet, and and then it becomes a mess to sort out. So people need to be aware of this and want to do it, and finding an incentive for people to be aware of and that's the big question I do not know the answer to.
Okay, so there is one very controversial question from Ben. Well, of course, it's from Ben, so it has to be there. Or it could have been from Mark. So I wouldn't, yeah. So we haven't spoken about the ARIN RPA. Have you read it? Would you advise an operator outside the ARIN region to agree to it? Well, when I read it, I was like, if I do something wrong, it means I will never be able to ever enter US ever again. Because there are so many liabilities I am accepting on my own behalf that I agreeing to it while I'm installing their tel, that anything goes back, the lawsuit is coming your way. Well, thankfully I live in Sydney, so I can just stay here and forget about it and not ever go to US. But that is a concern for an operator who probably is also operating in the US, and they say, oh, well, you accept it. And then, so you did, you spent a lot of time in that region. You did some workshop with ARIN and CNIC.
Yeah, for CNIC,
yeah. So what do you think?
I think that one is the least of the issues that's facing North America, to be honest. And that's not even heading down the story of, legacy address space and how to get that stuff signed. But, certainly with that workshop, that was a big one that came up. And I did I don't live in the US or have anything really operationally to do. I live in Australia, and, at least as far as the Aaron Tau use goes, I use it, and yeah, I agree. I accept all liabilities for other people's mistakes is a bit rough, very rough, and hopefully that will improve soon, next year after, sometime. But it's certainly a problem. But I'm not going to venture more about saying what I think should be happening, because I really honestly don't know. It needs to be resolved by the Aaron community. And then by impact, or by implication, it will help the rest of the world to be able to use the Aaron Tau without concern about being sued for something that basically Aaron has done wrong.
And the thing is, which slightly bothers me is, if I send that agreement, what I'm agreeing to, the terms and conditions, to a lawyer, the answer.
Oh, absolutely.
If I send it to my company lawyer, if I am part of, because I was thinking, when Ben mentioned it, I was thinking, okay, fine. If I go back in time and with my operator hat on, and I send it to my legal counsel, I say, I'm going to agree to this. Do you have any concern? And he will be running down the stairs and say, don't press enter.
That's right.
So it's a big concern. Operators, I don't want to blame anyone, but what happens is, if you install Routinator, it says just agree to it. But of course, they tell you that this is what you are agreeing to. If you want to read it, go there and just read it. It's not their responsibility that they give you the whole document itself. It's your responsibility. But it is something which we have all agreed to accept without looking into the consequences. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is something which I can't solve it from sitting in the AP region, and but it is the community. I mean, we are part of the Aaron community because it has no boundaries. The community is global, but I think it should be the push from the membership saying, if we are doing a good thing, creating ROAs, and the rest of the world is not accepting our ROAs, where does it lead us to? It's not a happy place, right? I don't think so. It's a good place. Yeah, I totally agree. Right. So the next question is from Benno. Thank you, Philip, for your discussion on RPKI deployment, roadblocks. I have no additional comment on self-hosted RPKI CA software. There are different use cases, but I agree that for 90-95% of the operators, the hosted solution run by RIRs will be sufficient. Mm-hmm. For some large operators, they have resources at 2 or 3 RIRs. Then a self-hosted RPKI CA portal gives you a single entry point to manage your RPKI resources. Also, it allows you to integrate RPKI with your IPAM systems. The Brazil use case is also special. Brazil has its own NIR and runs a publication service, but the individual operators need to run their own RPKI CA and use the Brazilian NRI publication point. Benno, it's a really very good point. I mean, yes, Brazil case is very, very unique. In AP region, APNIC service region, we have an NIR as well. But of course, they are providing services to their members. APNIC started it. I don't think so. I think VNNIC is also working on it. TWNIC has been offering it, and I'm not sure about India and Indonesia. But yeah, that's a unique service. But Philip, if I come to that, along with this statement, if the RIRs just give you an API access into their platform, then the big operators, they definitely have the resources to create a single page, a single platform for themselves, where it's just an API call, go in and create a ROA, delete a ROA, and something like that. Rather than creating it creating simplicity, as again you said it initially. If it is simple, people will be able to do it easily rather than doing a hosted CA. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. If there's a simple mechanism, they can run their own CA. There's a simple mechanism of, well, the single link to the registry one. The fundamental is that it's the simplest for the operator to use. Dima's mentioned that, people probably run a CA so it integrates with the IP address management tool that they have. That makes perfect sense to me as well. But for folks who don't really need any of this, we don't want people to be left with an impression, oh, I need to run my own CA and all the complexity to do that. So I think those who know what's needed and understand the complexity, they've run other similar things, they've got a software team internally who's very accustomed to handling that type of thing. Why shouldn't they do it if they feel that's best for the operational needs?
Well, yes, and we were looking at the details at one point at how many RIRs are providing the API access, and I think Randy did the recent paper on the relying party software, and he in that paper it was mentioned that how many are providing the API, if I'm not mistaken, or mixing the paper. And it was, I think it was the RIPE NCC who was doing it, and nobody else. So that is something maybe RIRs can look into this one, number one. Number two, yes, the IPAM solution. Again, that is a massively important piece of infrastructure for big operators, because that's how they manage it, right? And if you want to integrate it again, but if you have an IPAM, which can do an API calls out to out to the RIR's portal where they can do this, then I think that is still manageable solution rather than doing a hosted CA.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So it's I think, again, I'm coming to the conclusion because we are only talking about the hour, and I got the message that it's already 1 hour. So coming to the conclusion, if there are certain things, I mean, number one is RIRs should not stop the consultation process. It's not like they have done a good job, let's celebrate, and that's done. They have done a good job, but they still have to continue doing their consultation process with the community, and specifically with the big operators. And what Banner mentioned, the use case has actually arrived from those operators who are in multiple RIR region. Well, there is a reason we have NRO. It's a single body which looks after all 5 RIRs. Well, they have a job. I think they should do it. And what message, I would say the last message you would like to give to the operators who are here listening, probably on the edge, how to do, what to do, one message which can bring them on the other side of the fence?
I don't know. The simple message is just do it, isn't it? And it's, I can't really, well, say what else. I mean, because there are lots of stages in the process. It's not like we're suddenly going to implement something where it's going to potentially break your whole routing system. You can run ROV, but not actually drop anything at all, just to see what the impact might be. You don't have to go signing your own rows. Just install a validator, have a router in a corner, sit and just have a look at the RPKI table on there, so you get some idea of what would happen. You can note the invalids that are there, and just put your feet in the water just to have a test and see about what it could look like. I mean, this is a process I've used with quite a few over certainly the last 2-3 years. Just run a validator and have a look, see what happens. Don't put it in a critical core router, put it somewhere on the edge, give it the full BGP feed and just have a look, see. But, that gets at that stage, but then we're back to the whole issues of working through the hierarchy and, and also, this is only one small piece in a much, much bigger puzzle of trying to secure the whole routing system. And so, we need everybody really to step up and take the first step forward, because we have a lot more steps to try and do in the coming years if we still want this internet to work as reliably as if we've been accustomed to it over the last, well, I would say 30 years.
I absolutely agree. And one thing I just want to point out is when, again, I was talking to a person who say I need to test my router if it is capable of doing the raw validation. I need to install the validator of the line party software. So what should I do? I said, well, for the time being, you can just point it to my validator and I'll just allow it and you can test it. But for FYI, there's a Cloudflare RPKI service available publicly. You can just point to them. It's okay. That is my secondary RP as well. So it is. They don't advertise it as a public service, but it's there if you just want to test it. So you can do that as well. But just for the testing, don't rely on it for it right now. But you can. So your point of view is absolutely right. It's multiple steps we have to take. Creation of ROA is number one. Create ROAs is non-service impacting. You are not changing anything in your BGP. Of course, you have to go through certain hoops, which I hope the APNIC staff or the other RIR staff are listening to, and they can look into the UX work and how to make it simple. But that is one step. Number two is, of course, testing with it. And this is what we did in a lot of deployathons. So just trying to wrap it up, will you be doing another deployathon before the Apricot or during the Apricot, the next Apricot,
well,
the virtual one?
The deployathon works so well in person. I couldn't imagine what a deployathon could be like if it's online, because there was so much activity and interaction in the room. I couldn't think how you would even achieve that on a conference like this. I mean, it might be worth a try. If you're game or anybody else is game, we could certainly try and give it a go. But I just don't know what it could look like.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting experience. It was an amazing experience playing with the real hardware, thanks to Warwick from Arnet, who did the Juniper, and we had Nokia gear as well. So it worked really well, and the other Cisco and other stuff. So it can be a challenging part, but let's see if we can get some people who are willing to be part of that deployment and can do it. I'm more than happy to be to help you in that journey. So on that note, I would say thank you so much, Philip, for the conversation. I can see it's pretty dark outside behind your window. It's late, but I hope the people who joined in really like this, like the conversation. There are certain questions we haven't answered, but I'll make sure that we will be able to answer it in the next series, which is happening tomorrow with Jeff Houston. So he will be an interesting guest as well. So there's some interesting conversation coming up. So thank you so much to you, Philip, and thank you so much for everyone joining the session. And we will see most of you, or maybe all of you tomorrow. Till then, thank you so much. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you, Aftab. Thanks, everyone.